May 9th, 2025, the 80th anniversary of the end of what the Russians call the Great Patriotic War, which we call World War II. The parade came off today without a hitch in Moscow. There was a big parade. You had Gary showing you some of the scenes from it there. Huge crowds. Xi Jinping was sitting right next to Vladimir Putin on the dais. And most importantly, there were no drones in the air. There was no strikes on the Capitol. It's unclear if Ukraine even attempted to do so. They certainly did, firing hundreds, well over 500 drones of various calibers at Moscow in the days leading up to this. But I suspect that probably even China and the United States and others said, hey, yeah, wave off. You didn't get anything through. You didn't hit the place before that. Don't do it now because it would cause a major international incident. So it appears that that message finally did get through. And in any case, whether they tried or not, they didn't succeed. And Russia, was able to bring it off. And they had, I think, 20 some odd heads of state of various countries, 3 of which were from European countries. So that part was fine. So now then Russia's ready to move on to whatever's next. I'm going to play you a bit of a statement that Putin made toward the end here to kind of wrap this up. But before I get to what Putin had to say, I want to get to what the Americans are saying and what some of the Europeans are saying. Because even though the Russians were having this parade, of course, other people want to say, hey, they tried to rain on their parade and trying to keep the focus elsewhere, anything besides this, because listen, we got to be honest with it, right? These are really powerful images, and these kinds of images are going on all around the world. And people who are not invested completely in one side or the other are looking at this and going, when you take a look at what the Western side looks like, and when you take a look at what the Russian side looks like, which side looks like the more powerful entity? The words or the images speak for themselves. So that's the view right there from the Russian side. Let's switch back over to the U.S. side. Yesterday, State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce was asked, hey, by the way, what is the status of this ceasefire? Because we've been talking about this for a couple of months now, that Trump got Zelensky to agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. And then from that point forward, he started trying to get the Russians to agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, which obviously hasn't happened. Yesterday, Tammy Bruce was asked about the progress.
Is it still your position that complete unconditional 30-day long ceasefire should be the first step?
Well, it should be forever. I mean, you can't discuss, as the president has noted and the secretary, you can't discuss what the results are for peace when people are still getting slaughtered. How that can't work. It's a very low bar for a first step, and that remains the first step. It has to happen. We've been very clear, the secretary in particular, that it can only begin any discussion regarding how the peace endures is when you have a ceasefire, which is frankly the first key part of good faith regarding what you intend for the future. Okay, look, if you're talking to an American audience only, that works because you're mocking the other side and you're saying, man, what is wrong? This is elementary. What is wrong with Putin? What is wrong with these Russians? They don't get these most basic, obvious things. Okay, to say that the only way to end a war is to have first a 30-day or any version or duration of a ceasefire, and only then do you talk about the subject, that's a way, and it has been done plenty of times. But to try to have this mocking thing that says that's the only way, and this is elementary, and what's wrong with them to not do it? Zelensky agreed to it 2 months ago, and the thing still hasn't happened. And our position remains that is a primary thing to have to seek, to try to attain. If that's one of our primary things to attain, that's like saying, hey, I would like it if Mickey Mouse ears just popped up on my head while I'm on camera here. Well, nothing happened. That's about the same chance that you're going to get Russia to agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. They have said that from the outset. They've said, why would we do that? We are on the advantage militarily. We are driving them to the west. They cannot stop our onslaught, haven't for I think it's 30, 32 some odd consecutive months. Why would they agree to a ceasefire that would only help the Ukraine side? So if you're setting that up as a prerequisite to get to the second part, then you're guaranteeing you're not going to get to the second part. But that's not the only word out of the United States today or yesterday, because Vice President Vance
I think maybe less than hours later after this was made, he was also interviewed and also asked about the situation, but he had a slightly different take on where it may go.
What would bother me is if we conclude that the Russians are not engaging in the negotiation in good faith. And if that happens, yeah, we're going to walk away. The president's going to say we're out of this thing. And what that's going to mean fundamentally, I think, is that both Russia and Ukraine are going to be left to settle this thing without the advice and without the mediation of the United States. I don't think that's good for anybody. I don't think it's good for us. I don't think it's good for Russia or Ukraine. But we can only lead these guys to the well. We can't force them to drink. And that's what the president has done. And I do think we've had some diplomatic breakthroughs. Again, the fact the Russians are offering a peace plan at all, that's a breakthrough. The fact the Ukrainians are offering a concrete proposal, that's a breakthrough. But we've got to try to get these sides a little bit closer together to achieve a lasting peace. We're not there yet. We'll keep working on it until we decide that we ultimately can't make any more progress.
And then you would walk away.
We would. We would.
Okay, that was pretty categorical there at the end. We'll see if that plays out. But we need to look at a couple things. First of all, the discontinuity between those two statements made mere hours apart, where you have Tammy Bruce just almost hitting the lectern talking about how this is a prerequisite. We've got to have this, and why aren't they doing this simple thing like a 30-day ceasefire? And then you have the vice president saying, we'd like it to go this way, but you can't, we could lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But look, if you then say, as the vice president, we can't make them come to a deal, and we're going to walk if it doesn't, and we're asking them to do with the two sides to come together to make these arrangements. If they don't, then we'll walk. Now, that was the most categorical I've heard any American, to include the president or Marco Rubio, any of those, to just say, yeah, we'll walk. So now we just did a show yesterday where we showed you it's been weeks since they've been saying it's days away. Now 3 weeks from today, the first time on April 18th that Marco Rubio said that, and the weeks just kept on rolling, the days kept on rolling, etc. Maybe they actually are getting close to it now. We'll see how that works out. But if you're actually trying to somehow coerce the two sides to at least move in the same direction, then that's not going to do it, because by telling the Russians, the ones in the unequivocal and irrevocable military advantage over the Ukrainians, that if the two sides don't come together, we're going to walk, where is any motivation on the Russian side to do anything except just kind of go, all right, what's that deadline again? How many more days? You see that you incentivize Russia to do nothing. Now, listen, if that's your plan, if your plan is to walk away, there is a much better way to do it. And that is to not be seen as impotent at not being able to make a negotiated work, but to be seen as proactive and realistic, and recognizing this power dynamic, this imbalance that can't be breached, and say, okay, our recommendation is to get the best ugly deal you can get right now, and that's it. We won't support anymore. We're not going to continue to support a war that can't succeed. We're not going to enable you with more weapons, ammunition, training, intelligence, etc., targeting data. We're not going to give you that so that you can at least keep fighting and keep dying in more numbers, and then just let things take on a life of their own until the Russians move on. And then I'll just claim, well, we tried, but nobody did anything. That's not the good way to do it, because everyone sees through this. No one's fooled by this, or at least no one of any consequence. You may get some of the population, especially some of your supporters, to say, oh, yeah, he did. Okay, you don't need to get them. They're already on your side. But to everyone else, it makes us look impotent. It makes us look powerless. It's like I said, first of all, you can't make a negotiated settlement. You can't compel even the Ukraine side, much less the European side. You can't compel them to come together. And you're utterly powerless to get the Russians to do anything. And then it's going to end that same way anyway. That's already written in stone. The end is known, and it's that one. So why not make the best of it and be more proactive to where you actually have agency, and there's things that you can do to try and to get the two sides together, or at least, if nothing else, to try and say, all right, we're consciously going to go down this path here because it's the only rational path available. It doesn't make any sense to even pretend in these other directions. Mickey Mouse ears aren't going to pop on your ears no matter how much you wish it, no matter how hard you hit the lectern. It's not going to happen. So instead of looking powerless and foolish, how about looking realistic and strong to say, hey, I'm going to make this tough decision, but it's the only one available to us and the only thing that's going to keep more Ukrainians alive. That's the other thing. Don't forget that. If you take that course of action, you actually do what President Trump said he wanted to do, which is end the killing in the war faster. That's the way you get that done. You can stop the killing by making a proactive decision. Our support will stop, and we are now saying it's between you guys. Now, it's important to understand, where the Russians are on this, right? So I just showed you the United States side. In a minute, I'm going to show you the European side. We already know where the Ukraine side is. Zelensky has never changed from, I want more ammunition, I want more artillery, especially, I want more air defense, I want more jets, and I want more money. And then I want Mickey Mouse ears. He hasn't changed any of that. Russians also haven't changed their side. Here is from December, this past December, and it hasn't changed. Here is what both President Putin and Sergei Lavrov have said specifically on the two issues we're talking about. Here is a complete 30-day ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire, and an end to the war.
What we need is not just a ceasefire. We need peace, a long-lasting peace.
We cannot be satisfied with empty talk. So far, all we've heard is talk about the need to come up with some kind of truce. And it's not particularly hidden that this truce is needed in order to gain time to continue pumping weapons into Ukraine. A truce is a road to nowhere.
I mean, how can you argue with that? Russia's never said anything different. Subsequent to those two comments here, you had President Trump, after he got inaugurated on January the 20th, got on the phone with Putin and said, hey, I got Zelensky to agree to a 30-day ceasefire. What do you think? And then Putin said, oh, I tell you what, I want to work with you. I want to be as cooperative as we can, because the Russians, like Trump has said also, are looking already beyond the war. They're looking to a time to try to get back to normalized relations, because they know this war, the conclusion has already been decided, but the outcome is still open, and the timing is still unknown. So he says, I want to work with the United States. I want to figure this out. So I'll tell you what, I'll consider the issue, but not really, because he said there are huge caveats that have to go along with this. Nuance, I think, was the word that he used, at least as translated into English, which were huge. You may remember we had this whole thing on the show here where we talked about who's going to monitor this. It's this huge 2,000-kilometer front. What are the conditions? What are the penalties if whoever violates it? Who's going to hold people accountable? All these kinds of things. Lots of logistic issues. And he said that we won't do this until there is a negotiated settlement that has been agreed to, and the fundamentals of the outcome have been agreed to in advance. That includes denazification and demilitarization, as Russia defines it, which in practice meant there was never going to be a ceasefire. I mean, that's been evident from the beginning. So that's where we still are right now. And the Russian side has not changed from any of that. Even during the time they said they would contemplate it, their conditions never changed. And those are still the case today. We had the deputy UN ambassador for Russia on our show, and we point blank asked him, what is going to happen if you don't get all of your terms? And he said, it's evidence, it's happening already. We haven't changed. We'll continue fighting. So this notion that Zelensky keeps on saying that, well, we've agreed to a ceasefire unconditional for 2 months, and these darn Russians are keeping on firing missiles. They're keeping on going at the front. That proves who doesn't want an end to the war. Obviously, to anybody other than some Americans or Westerners and your Ukrainians, everyone else already understands that Russia is in the dominant position. You're not. Why would they stop? And they won't. So again, you have come off looking like, I want Mickey Mouse ears live on camera while we're talking. It just didn't happen. And so that kind of thing is never going to. And all it's going to do, folks, it's not funny. It's going to get more people killed. It's going to get more Ukrainians killed, because you can't change the outcome by trying to mock the other side and to shame them into something when they're looking with disdain on you as it is. Now, it's not just Zelensky. It's not just the United States. There are also several Europeans. And this is the same news that came out today. President Macron stressed that everyone must now work immediately to achieve a ceasefire without pretense or delaying maneuvers. Ukraine agreed to this ceasefire almost 2 months ago. I now expect Russia to do the same. Otherwise, we will be ready to respond decisively. Together with all our Europeans and in close coordination with the United States, the French president wrote on an X post. Also on Friday, new German Chancellor Merz threatened Russia with new sanctions. Merz also held a phone call with President Trump. Chancellor said he had expressed his support to Trump for a 30-day ceasefire. Trump, after his conversation with Zelensky on the May 8th, said that he ideally would like to see a 30-day unconditional ceasefire and the possibility of new sanctions on Russia. But listen, you can want that all day long, and we have been wanting it all term long, ever since Trump came into office. But those things haven't happened, and they're not going to happen. So why do we keep trying to achieve the unachievable? Why do we keep trying to go down a path that can't succeed? It's puzzling to me. I get politics. I get you want to put a good face on things, but folks, there comes a point to where when you try to put a good face on things in blatant evidence that what you're trying to achieve isn't working, and you're getting more people killed, then it's not politics, because now it's counterproductive for you, even on the political level, even on the messaging level, because you can't keep saying things that are more and more evidently untrue. I showed you at the top of the show here that statement or the images from the parade. You know, when you're talking about just visuals and what messages resonate with people around the world, when you see that kind of power rolling down the street, and it was quite a spectacle. I watched a little bit of it. I didn't watch a whole lot, but enough to see that those are some powerful images when you juxtapose them from the Ukraine side. I mean, they have no parade. They have no victory of any kind, no evidences of strength. Only Zelensky keep on saying things like he wants Mickey Mouse ears to pop out of his head. That's how it's being viewed. And if you're trying to have this political situation or messaging to try and sway people to think things, it doesn't work when the physical evidence so overwhelmingly shows the opposite to be true, because now then the opposite also works against you, that you're viewed with less and less credibility and weaker. And President Trump doesn't like to be seen as weak. And if he doesn't, then he needs to change course pretty quickly. So that comment there by J.D. Vance that, yeah, we're ready to walk. I mean, he should already have done it, but there's no time like the present. I mean, I'm saying within the next week, before 1 week, before next Friday, the best thing he can do is to say, okay, we came to in fact, even the better one, the Sunday talk shows. Perfect opportunity for that, because everybody's watching for that. That's where President Trump should send out, whether it's J.D. Vance again, Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, whoever, needs to get and say, all right, President has finally come to a conclusion. We tried everything. It didn't work. Now it's up to the Europeans and the Ukrainians and the Russians. If they want to keep fighting, more power to them. I think it's a bad idea. We're not going to underwrite failure anymore. We are not going to send any more American money, American weapons, American ammunition, and put the American prestige and name and reputation on the line for something that is going to lose. We're not going to do that, and we're going to move forward. That'll make all the supporters unhappy, and they'll yell and scream and whatever. That's up to them. They can do that. But history will show that is the right course of action, because the alternative, to keep the fiction going on, you'll still suffer all of those things I just mentioned, all the crying and everything else, and they will lose as well. So it'll be a double loss. So you're going to take a hit one way or the other. Take one hit and then be seen as in the right position later on, as opposed to taking a double negative hit, because that is where we are. Now, before I let you go today, I want to show you one other thing that it's kind of embarrassing for our side. In the days leading up to this, you may recall I mentioned that Germany and a couple of others in the Western European celebrated World War II Victory Day yesterday on the 8th. And Germany in particular said Russia and Belarus were disinvited. They couldn't even send diplomatic personnel. We were keeping them off. We didn't talk about any of that kind of thing here. Even today, with this victory, I looked through the Washington Post, the New York Times this morning, a couple of other Western European publications. You had to scroll way, way down to find anything at all. And it was kind of a small issue here, and it had a kind of a neutral headline, whereas, of course, Russia is somewhat different. Well, Russia did invite everybody who was a member of the World War II coalition that beat Nazi Germany. They invited them. 3 European heads of state went. I think Serbia, Fico from Slovakia, and Orban from Hungary. I believe those are the 3 that were there. But in the speech too, President Putin lauded his people who were fighting there, but then he also lauded without a caveat. He lauded the others in the West who were part of this. I would love to see something like this on the American side, where you can even be opposed to somebody, you can be having a proxy war against them, but you still recognize something that happened in the past that was a jointly benefit for the two sides. Unfortunately, so far, it's only on the Russian side.
Мы чтим каждого ветерана Великой Отечественной войны. Склоняем головы перед памятью всех, кто отдал свою жизнь за победу. Перед памятью сыновей, дочерей, отцов, матерей, дедов, прадедов, мужей, жен, братьев, сестер, родных, друзей. Склоняем головы перед нашими боевыми товарищами, погибшими смертью храбрых в праведном бою за Россию. Объявляется минута молчания. Дорогие друзья, в огненную орбиту Второй мировой войны было вовлечено почти 80% населения планеты. Полный разгром нацистской Германии, милитаристской Японии, их сателлитов в разных регионах мира свершился общими усилиями стран Объединенных Наций. Мы всегда будем помнить, что открытие Второго фронта в Европе после решающих битв на территории Советского Союза приблизило победу. Высоко ценим вклад в нашу общую борьбу солдат союзнических армий, участников сопротивления, мужественного народа Китая, всех, кто сражался во имя мирного будущего.
He highly values the efforts of the Allied armies. He specifically mentions the D-Day landings in Normandy as being instrumental in bringing it to an end. He didn't put any asterisk on it, didn't put any caveats on it. He just said, we value all that. We value our people. We value the others who fought alongside of us, because it was a one big victory for the civilized world. That should be something that we want to hearken back to. Look, if you don't want to like Russia, you don't have to like Russia. If you want to hate Russia, that's your prerogative. Individuals can do that. But if you want a world that is better than the one that we have right now, and you don't want one that is careening towards a potential eventual clash between the East and the West, then we need to come back to a position to where we're saying, what is true, what is real, where can we go from here? We need to understand that Russia is not bent on conquesting all of Europe. They don't even appear to be bent on conquering all of Ukraine. They don't even want all of Ukraine. They don't want anything west of the Dnieper. They would settle, and they have put on the table an offer only to take the 4 territories they have already bought with the considerable blood on their side. And again, you can even hate that, but that's the reality, folks. And if you keep pushing for non-reality, like we're not even going to give that up and we're going to get that back at some point, then all you're doing is saying we want more war, we want more conflict. Even if this one comes to some kind of a negotiated end at some point pretty soon, if we keep that mentality, if we keep building up like the Western Europe is saying they're going to, and want to be ready for a clash with Russia by 2030, we may get that war. So it's not just about where we're at right now. We have to end this now while there's still time to have a good future for everyone. Now, I'm not some pie in the sky guy myself and just saying trust everything Putin says. Don't trust anything he says. I don't trust anything anybody says for the defense of our country. I want to preserve and to have the capacity to defend ourselves with our own resources. That's what I think is every country should do, to include Russia, to include Germany, to include the Baltics, whatever you have to do. The rest of NATO, once this war is over, if you want to keep building up your militaries for self-defense and to prevent any kind of a Russian attack, there's good ways to do that. There's ways to do it that would deter a Russian attack that would not provoke an offensive in retaliation. There is no evidence that Russia just wants to conquer anything. As many people we've had on our show have said, what is the value to Russia? That Putin, unlike Hitler in the 1930s, does not have territorial ambitions. He does not want breathing room, any of that kind of stuff. He doesn't need any national resources. He's got them all. He wants to do business with everybody because he has the resources. He has resources he wants to sell, which the West needs, in cheap and abundant energy resources, fertilizers, food products, all kinds of stuff. There is so much opportunity for mutual benefit. All we've got to do is recognize reality, grit your teeth with the part you don't like right now. But if you want a better future for yourself, for your country, and the Europe writ large, then we're going to have to just stop this blind fiction that we've created for ourselves, that we want this outcome that is not attainable and is not possible, and instead go after the one that is possible, that is attainable at a cost-effective pace that can have us given peace and security and prosperity into the indefinite future. All that is on the table for possible right now, if and only if we get some kind of decent leadership. That, folks, is where it's all at. That's before us. That's the choice that we have. You can either choose a positive future without wiping away the realities of the Russian side. That's all on the table simultaneously. This future is possible. This future is also possible. And if you want to ignore the realities and keep going with the fiction, you will find that you get the worst outcome that's even possible, the one that you fear the most. Let's don't do that. On this day where both sides are supposed to be celebrating the victory over Nazism and the horrific 60 million people that were killed in World War II, let's make sure we don't get to the next one to where the death toll would almost certainly be higher and catastrophic for all of humanity. Let's don't go there, folks. We don't have to. This good future over here is attainable, and it's in our capacity to have. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Dana's Deep Dive. Signing off from Brown University, and we'll see you next time.